as a burn test, this has some specific important aspects that I'm trying to learn from. Things like, these are pieces, I mean they're kind of old pieces of oak that have been around for a while and I've got lots of knots in them which I don't really need or whatever. The finish that's been applied is the same finish applied in the same way that I'm going to do on the finished piece. Specifically it's sprayed, which is really important because when it's been burned, the charcoal on it and the charring will rub off on people's clothes or hands if they were to touch it and it's not oiled, so it has to be able to be refinished after it's been burned, and you don't want to refinish it by rubbing the oil on, which is what I'd usually do because that'll move that black soot around as well, so it has to be sprayed. The edge on this hole is the same edge as I've made on the proper piece. I want to see how that burns, if it disintegrates, if it expands, if the black is visible around it and how much. These dots here are inlays of walnut and they've been inlaid with the same glue that I've inlaid them in on the finished piece, because certain parts of the finished piece, because it's being burned, need to have a mechanical fixing in them, so there's a screw in them as well as a joint. And I've also inlaid a little tenon joint here. Now there's a bunch of tenons that come through onto the surface of the finished piece in this position, and I kind of want to know what happens with the glue. I want to know if it keeps hold, so we'll see what happens there. This is where most of the burning is going to take place. So again, it's been finished with the same oil. I want to know how that oil reacts to it, whether it smokes, which I think it will do, because I think most of the vegetable oils that are used in these kind of finishes do smoke. The shape is quite important, so I want to know how flames travel around this shape, whether they are restricted to a very small area or whether they're more expansive. I've also left a big hole at the back, which is also evident in the real piece, which is going to allow me to, number one, see what's going on in it and see how I'm raising up and down this burn cradle, and also it's going to allow me to restock the cradle with fuel if it needs it, or if I want to burn a different part and it's already burnt out even though the piece has caught fire. And finally, possibly the crux of the whole burn ceremony, this is called the basket, or I'm calling it the basket. This is really important because I want to be able to set fire to the piece in a controlled way where I can know where it's catching and be able to put out the areas that have burnt enough. The metal cage, this little cradle, allows me to move the fire around by means of pulling this cord. It allows me to use a prodder to basically move it horizontally inside the burn funnel, and it also allows me to refuel the fire and move it to a different part. That's what it does. That's going to be the tests. I'm going to burn them all. I'm going to try to set them off with some kindling, like that. We'll see if that takes like I hope it will. Stopwatch. Thank you, Dad, for sponsoring the matches today. The thing about this kindling is it really will go up once it's caught. Of course, in the burn funnel, it's actually more sheltered than this, so it'll probably burn easier, if anything. The thing is, it's going to burn up to the band, and then it's going to split it, and it's all going to fall apart and go out. So actually, that's a good point though, isn't it? Because if what I really want,
Can I get the sellotape?
I'm just going to move this elastic band at the top because do that. That's better. Can you fetch some wire for us?
Yes, I will. Give us the keys.
Can I have a go on the next one, please?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. You're helping Frank.
Mind that flame. Look.
Not in the slightest. Really. The tests that we've just been doing on lighting a little package of wood actually have been really tricky, and so I'm thinking, well, actually we can light the basket outside of the piece, like this, where it lets loads of air all around it, it's controlled, and we don't have to like bind it all together, so that's what we'll have a little go at. Should we just do it? I think you should pack it full of full of these first. I've put a load of We're in. How fast is this going to go? You're not prepared. Well, I didn't realise.
He got something.
What have you put on the other one? 15 and 30 degrees.
Do you see how it's made a profile of William Morris?
Have a little bit more fuel. But that being said, I think that putting one fuel in at a time seems to be a better bet. I just thought it would get that. At one point there will be a natural kind of inferno over the whole thing. Right. And then it's just going hours of worry until you realise you could screw it in with it. Well, this is it. So let's just leave. Can we just leave this on here and see what happens? Just until yeah. And I'll just keep putting it out at the bottom. It is spreading out the way I thought it would. Yeah. And if that had been lower down and we literally just left it like this, it would be starting to do this here, wouldn't it? Yeah, sure. Still smoking. So excellent flame spread is probably not a... I wonder if there's a way of putting the fire out without spraying it with water and putting... I'm pushing it quite hard there. That's too weak. That's too weak. But that one's alright. So it's sort of, that's alright. So what, well, almost. This bit's worked really well. I think that looks fantastic. And I like this as well. I really like that it came over the edge. That may not happen as much in the finished piece because this juts out a lot more from here, maybe another 10 centimeters. So it depends how that's going to play out. It's gone through mainly at the top where it was effectively exposed to the flames for longer, even though it seemed not as intense. So that makes me think that we've got to watch it very, very carefully. There's a 30-second window maybe to actually put out the flames before they go too far. And then the other thing that's quite interesting is that on some of them, this bit's a good example, you can see what timber was unaffected with that amount of burn, which is actually not that much left. It's maybe 10% in the middle. Some of these aren't too weak, like that one's not weak. And I would say that's about the same amount of burn. So this bit I think has been hugely successful. I really love this edge. I'm just feeling it on the inside and it's still quite solid, which is important. We're not absolutely sure, but we think maybe that this isn't taking so easily because this piece has been oiled, and it may be that we need to leave the piece unoiled for the burn ceremony and then oil afterwards, which is a bit of a pain in terms of finishing, but it's going to have to be oiled in some places afterwards anyway to stop the char from coming off. What we found was that you have to be very directional with the water because if it's a mist, it basically puts out all the fire, and you really want it to put out the square inch that's burning too much. So that was really useful. But more than anything, how condensed the fire was really startling. it doesn't spread that much, and that's either the oil or it's just the proportions of the piece. Also, the angles of the burn funnel sort of prevent it from spreading as easily as it would do, for instance, if it was the other way around. Actually, manoeuvring this was quite interesting. So one of the things we learned is this brass wire is just hopeless. When it gets hot, it just snaps. And so we're gonna have to use steel for the real thing, and maybe even some proper thick wire to actually separate them out, because it was sort of closing up. We need it to stay nice and open so that it allows oxygen to come in around the fire. Moving it up and down was fine, poking it around with a stick was fine, trying to get it up to the back was really difficult, but we think that's probably going to be not such a big issue, because we can basically position this towards the back of the burn funnel, because this section will be off on the real thing as well. We can position this to the back of the burn funnel and effectively burn it up and just keep putting it out at the bottom, and that should hopefully spread up. All in all, it was successful in parts, it was surprising in other parts, and it was really frustrating in other parts, and that's why we did a test.